Hey guys, so I just wanted to do a little lesson today on some low fidelity prototyping, and I'm going to walk you through a bit of a visual of how I would make an example of one. So here we go. I've got some measurements here for an iPad. This is a 2017 released one, so it's not one of the brand new pro ones, but I'm going to do a bit of a prototype or a low fidelity prototype of a interface for an iPad that I want to use on an iPad. So I've got some foam core here, I've got a scalpel, I've got a metal ruler, I've got some pens. You can use anything, you don't have to use foam core, but I really like this foam core. You can get it at any like newsagents, art supply shops. It's essentially just like paper with a little bit of a foam layer in between. So what I've done is I've googled the measurements for this iPad, so I've found out the actual dimensions, and I'm just marking it now up on the foam core. I want to get it fairly accurate because I want this to be a low fidelity prototype, so it's a kind of like a first mock-up. So I've measured it out. I'm going to cut this out now with a scalpel. I like to use a scalpel for foam core because it's really sharp and it's really neat, so I get nice, clean, crisp edges. So I'm going to slice that out. So low fidelity prototyping is something that, most designers do. Before you actually make something, before you invest in using a lot of materials, people do mock things up. It might sound silly initially to be making an iPad out of cardboard, but really, when you're starting to design one and you're writing in down dimensions, sometimes it's really hard to visualize it without actually having the physical thing in front of you. So by cutting it out of something like foam core cardboard, you can actually hold it physically in your hand, it's tactile, and you can see if the dimensions are actually right. So what I'm doing now is I'm actually just measuring out the inner dimensions. So this is kind of like the frame, and I'm going to cut out the screen. So measuring the little dimensions on the edge, how far the screen is, and how much metal there is around it. It's really funny when you actually make things up out of, cardboard, plasticine, foam core, you start to really see the physical dimensions and the size of it, and it really helps you refine your designs. So when you first make something, you might think it looks fantastic on paper, and then you cut it out and see how big it is, and it might look really silly. It might look way too big for the user that you're trying to pitch the item to, or it might look really, really large and you need to scale it down more. And prototyping gets more and more detailed as you go. It doesn't have to be, you can't quite see the marking there, but I have marked it just because I used orange. But yeah, it gets more and more detailed. The first copy you might do might be out of cardboard. And if it looks good, a designer might then go 3D print it out of, a more expensive material, just to see it a little bit more refined, a little bit more in detail. So I'm just cutting out that inside. So I'm essentially cutting out the screen and I'm leaving the frame. I'm cutting it out because I'm kind of going to use it like a picture frame. I'm going to draw up some interfaces that I want to prototype, so some websites that I want to prototype. And I'm going to use it as a bit of a frame to see what it would look like in an iPad or viewing on an iPad. It just helps me get the perspective, helps me get the dimensions and the scale of elements that I'm going to put on my website accurate for a viewer that was actually looking at it on an iPad. So I'm just making sure I cut those corners so it pops out nice and neat. Okay, that looks pretty good. So that's my frame to scale of a 2017 released iPad. Looks pretty good. Kind of can imagine holding it now, and I can imagine how big my screen actually should be. Alrighties, I'm going to get a little bit extra now, and I'm going to draw on a button only because it helps me understand which way my iPad is facing. So I'm going to draw that on. I'm a visual person, so I need that button. Cool. Alrighties, my little frame of my iPad. So I'm going to make a back for this iPad because I want it to be sturdy and I want to be able to attach a piece of paper between it. So I'm actually using the piece that I cut out, putting it on the back, and my paper can slide through those gaps and I can pull it through. Might not make sense at the moment, but I think if you watch a little bit further it will. Okay, so I'm going to glue down the sides, but not the top and not the bottom. I'm going to leave a gap so that I can run paper through it, and then I'm just going to trim those sides off. I might get the paper ready now before I glue it down. So I'm going to use that back piece as my measurement because I know that's the size that I cut out. And I'm just going to measure some strips of paper to fit. So out of this A3 I can get 2 pieces. Only about, I think, 22 centimeters wide that iPad was. Actually, no, like 18 centimeters wide. Okay, so I've measured them out. I'm going to cut them. And I can actually join these together with tape or glue and make like a long paper strip that can be pulled through that will almost imitate a scrolling website. So this is probably like my stage 2 of prototyping. Initially I would have just drawn up the websites or I might have just sketched the website on the iPad. And now I'm low fidelity prototyping it to get a bit of a better visual of how it would actually look on a physical iPad. Okay, so I'm going to tape it together and then I can use this paper to draw on my website elements. So I could draw the title and the pages and any tabs or buttons that I'm going to have, and it can just be scrolled through that frame and I can pull it up and down and that will mimic that scrolling website. Alright, so I'm going to get the back glued onto that frame now. I've got a hot glue gun, only because hot glue is really quick drying, so that's going to be quick for me. So I'm going to glue down just the sides of the frame, not the top and bottom, because that paper is going to be kind of like laced through. My glue stick has decided not to work. So now I have the world's biggest glue stick. Alrighties. If you can get your hands on a hot glue gun, I fully recommend it for any prototyping or any design work because it is so quick to use and it's, you know, you place it and it sticks. So you don't have to wait around for, 3 hours for your PVA glue to dry. So I'm going to place it down, press it really hard so I know that it's attached well, and pretty much wherever I place it, it has now stuck. So that's awesome. Cool, that looks good. Alrighty, so I'm going to trim off those sides. Just remember, if you are using a scalpel, don't trim right towards you, trim to the side so you're not going to accidentally slice yourself. Keep the lid on it, don't leave the lids off it because they are incredibly sharp. I always put my lid back on. Okay. Trim off any loose bits, make it look nice and neat. Okie dokies, that's it. All right, I'm gonna get this paper ready so that we can lace it through. I'll just show you how it laces through. Kind of fits, I might need to trim it down slightly. Okay, but it laces through well. So we can actually practice and show, a client, if we were showing what it would look like on the iPad before we spent a lot of time actually designing it, we can show them visually a basic version of what it could look like. So that's it. That is my frame, that's my iPad ready for some low fidelity prototyping. All right, to finish this off, just so we do the whole kit and caboodle, I am going to mock up quickly a example of an interface. So I'm not even gonna put any of the text on there. I'm just gonna draw boxes for the elements and just label them, just annotate them so I know what they are. So for example, I'm just drawing a box at the top for the heading of my website. I'm just drawing some lines there to say that there's gonna be some kind of, bio text. I'm gonna draw a large rectangle that's just gonna represent a scrolling gallery that's going to go across left to right of maybe products or services or whatever this website is for. I might pop a couple other boxes down here that could be buttons or links that you can click on. Maybe testimonies or something from clients. So obviously I would have this designed first if I was actually designing the website, but this is just an example. So I'll just label them. And underneath I might put a couple little boxes that could be maybe social, so it could be like your Instagram link, Facebook, Twitter, whatever the company uses. Okay. So then I could keep going, I could keep adding elements or different pages. And then I can actually slide it into my low fidelity prototype, my mock-up, of that iPad. And now you can kind of see visually how big it would be on an actual iPad. And you can start to scroll it so you can see how the elements look together as you move through that website. So that's kind of what I mean by low fidelity. So low fidelity is like an initial mock-up. You're not putting a lot of resources into it, not spending a lot of money, and it helps you get perspective. That's it.